I want to introduce Geoff Moore. He's the author of so many great business books. Crossing the Chasm is, of course, the first big book that everybody here knows about. Inside the Tornado, another awesome book that builds on Crossing the Chasm. Dealing with Darwin, Living on the Fault Line, Guerrilla Game, Escape Velocity, and his most recent book, Zone to Win, which he's going to share advice today. He's a venture partner, at Wildcat Ventures, Moore David Howe, partner at the Chasm Group. Here's his Twitter handle. And, Zone to Win came out 7 years ago. So he's going to get us up to date on what we've learned about innovation since then. So with that, Geoff, welcome. All right, cool. Well, let's do a little fireside chat, and then we'll open up Q&A. Real quick, one thing that, in reading Zone to Win, you talk about the need to get clear on 3 different time horizons or investment horizons. And I often see teams, the default, just like the default is peanut butter, the default is always just short term, like everything's short term, 100% short term. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the different investment horizons and why it's important to think that way.
So this was a model that the McKinsey folks came up. A guy named Mehrdad Bagai wrote The Alchemy of Growth. And basically what he said is, when you're looking at budget allocation, the CFO, who's the keeper of the shekels, right? We're the keeper of he said, well, what am I going to return on this investment? And so they said there's actually 3 horizons you want to think about. One is the one you just said. I'm going to get my return this coming fiscal year. It's going to be in the performance zone, and we're going to get more salespeople. I'm going to get more sales, or I'm going to launch products. I'm going to make more money. And everybody gets that one. And all these companies that have the Zone to Win challenges, nobody's confused about Horizon 1. They got it. What we thought for a while was, their problem is they're not innovative enough. And that caused us to focus on Horizon 3. So Horizon 3 is maybe like 3 years out and beyond. This is like, SpaceX, or this is like, quantum computing, or maybe not even that dramatic, but something pretty far, maybe cryptocurrencies, further out there. And the thing is, we thought, well, these guys are these old companies, they can't do that. The truth is, yes, they can. I mean, Xerox PARC invented the Macintosh, not Apple. DEC, IBM Labs, Nokia Labs, HP Labs, really, really cool Horizon 3 stuff, okay? So that was not the problem. Was this thing that the McKinsey guys called Horizon 2. And we called it the Horizon 2 challenge. It's not, you're going to lose money this year. You might break even next year, but you're probably still going to lose. You're certainly not going to be any close to what your normal core business can do. And then in the 3rd year, things are going to look pretty damn good. Well, the problem with that is people go, well, who wants to sponsor that one? Because, the 3rd one, you're not spending a ton of money in Horizon 3. That's why they can do it. It's R&D, but you're not doing Super Bowl ads. You're not doing global distribution. That's fun. Horizon 1, I get the money back. But Horizon 2, I kind of have to spend kind of Horizon 1-ish type money, and I get kind of crappy results. That was the one that just frosted people. And it's why people fail in the transformation zone. They get halfway into Horizon 2, and they just think, oh man, I can't do it.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, that it negatively impacts Horizon 1. By definition, Horizon 2 negatively impacts Horizon 1.
And so therefore, one of the demands of the CEO and the CFO and the investor relations person in a public company is, when you're going to go into a Horizon 2, if you're going to do a transformation, you have to create a narrative that not only your people believe in, that your customers can believe in, your partners can believe in, but your investors can believe in. And by the way, when you announce this narrative, all the value investors in your stock, before the end of the earnings call, they've sold your stock. Right? But you're hoping to attract growth investors to backfill when the value investors punt. And there's a period where they're not that fast in coming. And this is why it takes a lot of courage in a transformation.
Right. Cool. Yeah. And it reminds me of the Google, 70, 20, 10, 70% this year, 20% Horizon 2, 10% moonshot stuff.
And by the way, it's really easy to do that when you have the largest money engine in the world working on your behalf. Yeah.
When you can spin off 10%, no problem. Hey, we do 10%. Go to the casino, take that 10%, put it on black. Let's see what happens. Yeah, exactly. Now, one dynamic you alluded to briefly, I wanted to touch on a little bit more is, hey, when a company has a large scale successful product, it kind of builds momentum around that. And then the org, when they try to do a new product, they have trouble making it successful. It's almost like an organism that has antibodies, like rejecting the new thing, saying, no, we've all evolved to make this thing successful. Could you tell us more about that dynamic and how to avoid it?
Well, you can't avoid it because you did evolve to make that thing more successful. And by the way, inertia, which we usually use as a bad word, inertia, if you're on a straight stretch, inertia is what keeps you going. Right? And so you want to have a performance zone that is strongly committed to it. So what can you do? So first of all, the first thing you can do is set up the incubation zone to stay out of its way. Don't let that culture and that set of values have any influence in the incubation zone. And the way you want to do that is you actually want to create a zone where there's a board. It's almost like they were general partners in a VC firm. You assign 2 or 3 or 4 executives. You say, guys, we're going to give you a pot of money, maybe that 10% from Google, whatever it is. You don't have to spend it, but it can't be spent outside of this zone. So we're either going to spend it in the zone or we're not. We want you to fund these opportunities like a VC. So don't just give them a year's worth of money. Fund them to the next milestone. Test them. Do all those kind of things. Okay. So with those kinds of dynamics, and we talk a lot about how to do that in the book, you can actually build a portfolio of candidates. And the antibodies, that is not a problem. Now, how do you get out of there, though, and back in? Because eventually we got to get to the performance, right? We want to leverage our global scale. 2 ways. One way is, if we just pull our horns in a little bit, we can kind of make this the next big thing for an existing product line. So we don't have to revolutionize the world. We don't have to tell people you have to abandon all of your past, approaches and start all over again. You can actually graft this onto your existing business. You can convert your on-prem license to a ratable subscription model and still have the same customers, same salespeople, same going forward. So that's like going from incubation to performance without going through the transformation zone. You put an overlay Salesforce on top of it. You give it extra marketing. You do a bunch of stuff. So it's not as profitable during that transition as it will be, but it doesn't embarrass you. The transformation zone, on the other hand, does embarrass you, right? That's the one where you say, okay, now we really do have to go all in. And in that one, when there's someone in the performance zone who will resist, and there will be, they have to be fired. Seriously, the only way you get through a real transformation is there are serious leaders who not because they're bad people, these are the people that got you there. They just cannot get their head around this. And they just won't, they're like athletes that won't get off the field, right? And you have to take them off the field. And that is, if I have to say, I think that's the single hardest thing a CEO would have to do. But if you leave them there, that means you give permission to anybody to opt out. And during a transformation, there is no opting out.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's like, action or inaction sends a signal. So if people are misbehaving and they're not being called out on it, it sends a signal, hey, it's okay to be a renegade.
There's nothing more terrifying to an employee than to realize that your CEO is being called out and not responding.
Right. Yeah. No. Shortly before I got into it, when Bill Campbell was the CEO and we got an acquisition offer from Microsoft, everyone was all excited. Then when it fell through, it was kind of like this loss of morale. And so he had to kind of call everybody out. And it was a saying like, are you on board or not? Like you go around and be like, are you on board or are you not on board? And he had to let go of people that weren't on board. Right. So,
well, and that's why we called him coach.
Yeah, exactly.
It was just like, do you want to play in this game or not?
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, I'm just wondering, so we got this awesome zone model. Are there typical patterns you see or typical points where company growth, because as you said, when you're a one product company and you're trying to get the first product, you're not quite there yet. What point in a company's growth or evolution are trigger points where they need to transition to that, like certain thresholds of revenue or people, or what are the factors in your mind?
It's not so much threshold. I think two things will characterize that you should say, because it's not the size of the company. Mm-hmm. First one is, are you going from your first product to a new product line? So right. Now all of a sudden, for the first time, you're going to have a crisis of prioritization, right? Because there's not where do I put my dollar? And then the second thing is, am I funding myself out of my operating income or out of private capital? As long as you're funding yourself from private capital, you can raise the extra money and you can solve the crisis of prioritization by giving away equity, right? But once you're saying no, we're a public company or our private sources of private capital are not giving us more capital. Now we've got this problem of, okay, we've got a fixed pie and we've got to figure out how to allocate the fixed pie. So now we're back into that strategic asymmetrical resource allocation problem. I would say most companies, the best signal is the third one then is we may be a one product company, but if we don't change there's a new wave that's taking us out. Like we're General Motors, we make combustion cars, and it's like, well, there's this electric vehicle thing, right? So it can be that one. But I think for most companies, my guess is you've probably been in existence more than a decade, maybe 15 years. You have a real customer base. You have a predictable performance. You're actually probably doing pretty well in your core business, and you've decided to go on to something else. Now you're going to have the zone problem.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing to see the number of electric car ads these days, right? It's just everybody. It's so
between
funny.
Cryptocurrency and electric cars. I thought the Super Bowl was just going to, I didn't know if it was a football game or not.
I mean, you got to buy your electric car with crypto. What else?
Exactly. Absolutely.
Exactly. Cool. All right, cool. Well, one of my favorite analogies that I want to touch on with you, the bowling alley analogy, you mentioned it briefly from Inside the Tornado. And I work with a lot of companies working on that first product. And they struggle to identify what that head pin should be. That's like one of the biggest challenges I see teams. So I'm just curious, what advice do you have for companies trying to figure out the best head pin that they should go after?
Yeah, this is important. So because in the early market, remember, it's about you. In the early market, you're kind of like you're like a grandchild. You are the darling. Everybody wants to sit you to sit on their lap. Come to grandpa. Okay, so it's great. Okay, now you're going to cross the chasm. So now the issue is nobody on the other side of the chasm cares about you at all. I mean, your mom might, but nobody else, right? So therefore, it's like how, and furthermore, no matter how much you talk about how great your product is, they're not going to listen. So what will they listen to? Well, they'll listen to themselves. If you will talk about them, they will engage in conversation with you. Well, what can you say to them? Well, this is where you get to this use case thing. I need to find an urgent use case that they care about, they can't solve. And we think if we pull together what we call the whole product, not just our product, but the complete solution for that use case, the whole product, these guys will go, whoa, I'm failing with everything else. If you guys will really make that commitment, I'll go. So you say, okay, I got it. I read the book, saw the movie, got the T-shirt. Great. But now which one? And because, you think, well, it could be aerospace. It could be retail. It could be fintech. I was thinking little telco. Which one? The answer is anyone is better than, first of all, you don't have to pick the perfect one. You just have to pick one that you can nail. And then the key thing is once you pick one, and some of the things you can use to evaluate, and here's the ones we use. How compelling is the reason to buy? How urgent is the use case? If I had to pick one factor, I would say find the nastiest, meanest, toughest problem, because those people will come to the party with you. But then the second one is, can we pull together, with the help of partners, a whole product that just nails it? And if we can, then you don't have to look much further. Oh, the third one might be then, do we have access to this thing? First of all, is it in a geography that we have access to? Can our sales channel get to the people that matter? Those kinds of things. But that's about it. And if you say I have 2 or 3 or 4 good candidates, yeah, but the mistake people make, as you well know, because you've seen this a lot. Well, I'll try 2 or 3, and whichever one catches fire, that's the one I'm going to do. And I always have this image of somebody who's got a match, and they're running it under one log, and then they run under the other log, and then they burn themselves. It's like, man, just hold the match in one place.
Right. If you want to start a fire, hold the match in one place. Yeah, good. It's peanut butter all over again, right?
That's right. Peanut butter, fires, bowling pins,
it's like this,
tornadoes,
it's like,
what the hell?
Hedge our bets by going after 3. One of them's going to stick. It's like the thing I use is, hey, the more spaghetti you throw at the wall, the better the chance something's going to stick. But but the focus isn't there, right?
Well, and the problem is because you've got to penetrate. So the thing is, and that means it's a little bit like, think about a woodpecker or something, because the first few times you come, you got to keep it, and therefore you got to always hit, and eventually you will break through if you keep pecking at the same place.
Right.
If you peck around like that, you'll never break through.
All right, good. We got some good analogies. Cool. Well, we were talking earlier, and you've obviously written lots of books, probably the most books of anybody that has spoken with us. And you've recently been blogging more and like blogging every week on LinkedIn. Maybe you could share what some of your recent posts are about. We could talk about that.
Well, that'd be fun. So LinkedIn, I love the LinkedIn blog because I always end it with the same tagline, which is, that's what I think. What do you think? And what's cool about LinkedIn is people tell you what they think. So it's really cool. But maybe some things that the people on this podcast, on this webcast might be interested in are, one, I did just a recent one on data-driven decision-making, and how the truth is, if you're really going to do data-driven decision-making, you have to collect the data, and that data has to be there. You can't say, oh, I've got a decision, I got to go get some data. The data has to be there, which means it has a big impact on telemetry, the whole idea of product management, designing the data discovery and data visibility into the product experience and into the product infrastructure, so that you can be data-driven, as opposed to saying, oh, I wish we could be data-driven. I wrote another one recently called The Uses of Use Cases. And so we've talked a lot about use cases in the bowling alley. I also talked, though, about use cases as a way to do career development for the people reporting to you. So if you like, it's a really cool assignment for a high potential person in your team to be given custody of a use case. Say, look, I want you to take that. I want you to pretend you're the CEO of this use case. I want you to build a market plan for it. I want you to help us figure out what the whole product is. I want you to create some marketing literature. I want you to go on sales calls. I want you to work with the product team to create whatever features you're going to add to this thing. I want you to, so that I think it could be a really, 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 really fun one. And then the third one was, I did a kind of enterprise level prioritization, sort of a little bit like that scorecard that we shared. And so I like the LinkedIn blog because, very quickly you either get like, well, you had 1,000 views and 6 shares, or you had 3,000 views and 500 shares. So yeah. It really tells you quickly, like, okay, that was note to self.
You get quick market feedback on what people like.
You do, exactly. Which all product managers, I'm sure, will appreciate.
Yeah. Well, on the use cases one, it's almost like, it sounds like that's a unit of accountability or responsibility that you can assign to people. Say, okay, you own this use case or this set, you own this set.
And particularly, it's important because you want to have things that are measured by the external world as opposed to internal. The problem if you have internal metrics is they can be politicized, well, they don't like me or they do like me or blah, blah, blah. Or they can have Barney metrics, well, I check this box and I check that box. It's like, but if it's a use case in the world and you say, well, how many customers did you get on this use case with this amount of time? And it just kind of makes you grow up pretty fast, and it makes you ready to become a general manager. I mean that a product manager who's actually taken one or more use cases that had an impact on the market. That's a pretty good resume for a general manager.
Yeah. Yeah. People use the phrase, outcomes over outputs, right? Far too often we're focused on internal outputs that don't matter. So yeah.
It's exactly the same exact concept. Outcomes, use cases is a great place to use outcomes as opposed to outputs. Great.
Cool. Last question is, I know Zone to Win was your last business book, and I've been a fan of your business book since 1986 when I came out to Stanford Business School and saw you speaking at Terman. You have now a non-business book, The Infinite Staircase, that came out last year. So I'm sure I'm not the only one that would love to hear about that. What's that all about?
Well, so, I started out life as a PhD in medieval and Renaissance English literature. Some of those books, a lot of those books behind me are part of that too. So this is it's a basic book about metaphysics and ethics. Really, it's about basically trying to say how does the world work, and once we have an idea of how the world works, how should we act? And the reason why it became important to me is I have pretty traditional values. I mean, kind of this traditional Judeo-Christian values that we all grew up with. But I don't believe in the religious narrative that gave rise to those values. I'm a Big Bang guy. I'm with Sheldon, right? So it's like, well, wait a minute. If there was a Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago, how did we get from there to here? And by the way, when did these what authorizes our ethics if it's not a God saying you're going to go to heaven or hell? Because I don't. That's not a narrative I can buy into. So I wanted to figure out, well, so how would you create an account? So it's called what the universe tells us about life, ethics, and mortality. And so it's kind of a big book. It's 200 pages long, so it's not that big a book. And it's a frame. By the way, the thing that I laugh about though is. And it's a framework book. It's like Crossing the Chasm or Zone to Win. It's just another framework. The Infinite Staircase. It's a framework for emergence. The guy only has one trick. He just keeps doing it over and over again. He just moved it. So, but I hope some people on this call will check it out because it's a book I care a lot about.
It sounds like you should read that right after you read Doug Adams' Life, the Universe, and Everything, and put those two together.
Yeah, thanks for all the fish.
Yes.
Or maybe it's just 42. I mean, there was a couple of different things. Yes.
There you go. Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with me. Let's transition and open it up to audience questions. So the first person we have here is Ming.
Hello, and thank you for the session. My question is for the incubator zone. For the people who believe what you believe, any advice or elaboration on how to find that community?
Yeah. So what's good news about that community, and so remember that community is made up of both the Sheldons and the Steve Jobs, right? We call them the technology enthusiasts and the visionaries. So I think the best way to do it is you tell your story in communities of technology enthusiasts. And they're the first people that can kind of see what you're talking about because they get it. They see the leverage. And then those folks have relationships with visionaries because visionaries collect technology enthusiasts as a way of staying informed. And so they will tell the visionary. And then the real exciting moment is when you actually are talking straight to the visionary. It tends to be personal. It doesn't work like you can't like blog posting or impersonal venues. Doesn't really work. It's got to be more intimate than that typically, because what they're going to want to do very quickly is they're going to say, well, let me tell you what I believe, and then they're going to want you to kind of connect, and they'll say, well, that was very interesting, but you know what I would use it for? I would use it for something completely different. And then you go, really? What would you use it for? and then often that first project is like, whoa, okay. Well, if you want to put a bunch of money in the pot, sure, we'll do that. And so that's kind of how it can happen.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Thank you.
Thank you, Ming.
All right, Ming, thank you very much. I think next up we have Ron.
Thanks so much for the talk today. I really enjoy your books and I really enjoyed this talk. I've been in startups and in large corporations, and I was really curious if you could talk a little bit more about the skill sets that are required to take a product from incubation through transformation and then have it ready to plug into the corporate infrastructure. And I think you already talked about kind of the air cover that's required. But there's also a mindset and a skill set gap.
Yeah, no, this is important. And this is a place where it's really, there's three scenarios I would give you. One is, you were the CEO of a startup that you were funded, and you were trying to get the VCs to get you to escape velocity. Let's call that scenario one. Scenario two is you were actually started inside the corporation, and now you've got to get it to the performance zone inside the corporation. That's a different problem, as you well know, and I'll talk about that in a second. And the third is you were acquired. You instead of going public, this company acquired you, but they acquired you with the thought that you were going to be their next, great success. So the skills in all those three are very different. In the case of the VC world, you've got to be an amazingly charismatic entrepreneur. It's all about you and the customer and winning the customers over. And then can you build a team? Can you? And by the way, the good news is you can hire with equity, and so you'll get a shot at getting really some very A players. And so probably the single most important characteristic of that first thing is how good are you at hiring? And most people are not very good, frankly. They're okay, but they're not good. So VCs really care a ton about that. And sometimes if you have a good VC, they'll help you. Now, the second one is, okay, no. We started this inside the company and we want to take it to the performance zone. And maybe you've even been an employee for the company for the last 5 or 10 years, but we gave you this new assignment. Now you got to be able to navigate your own company. And probably a transformation zone is not the place you want to go. What you'd like to do is that transition zone play. You'd like to be able to use some, because hopefully you have some relationship equity with the people in the performance zone. They know you, hopefully they have some trust with you. But this new thing is like, really? I mean, so, and then you have to kind of work with them. But that would be, I would think, less radical, more still forward looking, but not as radical. And then the third one's really interesting, which is you get acquired. And you get acquired often at quite a nice premium. And the idea then is, can you join the other company? Most acquired CEOs can't. Because they built this thing around, frankly, a little bit around their own identity, because they were the CEO. It was this incredible thing. And so all of a sudden now the acquiring CEO and the acquiring board and the acquiring management team is saying, you need to join us. And, they try, but their narrative, it's hard to align the narrative. And frankly, they've been made pretty wealthy. So normally what happens is after a well-meaning, and by the way, the first year they were told, we're not going to touch the culture. You can be yourselves. We're not going to change it in any way. And by the way, they don't, which is a mistake. I mean, the truth is, yes, we are. We are going to change the culture. Now, we're not going to try to make you brain dead. We're going to try to make you part of a larger, more successful team. But that's not what people hear. But, people hear, no, you're going to, suppress all of my creativity. So the problem is it's a real challenge. And occasionally it does happen. And when it does work, it can be just transformative. I remember when BEA acquired WebLogic, the WebLogic team did change BEA. The new co-CEO at Salesforce, Brett Taylor, came from Quip acquisition, so it can happen, but it's a challenge. And by the way, you had kind of an interview with a vampire look with that video. It's kind of working for you, actually. Okay, Rod, back to you, Dan.
All right, thanks, Rod. All right, next up we have Aileen Alden.
Hi, yeah, it's Aileen. Thank you. So many questions. I'll just narrow it down to one that's kind of pressing right now. So I love what you're saying about going through a transition zone instead of a transformation zone to take sort of like the new product ideas inside, a large company and bring them forward. But where I'm sort of stuck kind of professionally and in the discussion is on how do you fit the new way of thinking or the actually maybe the more fine-tuned way of thinking about those metrics into the organizational structure that has the quarterly earnings reports, right? That has that pressure zone around, of fitting it into a model that's ROI based, or earnings kind of based. So have you seen anything that's like a successful way to bridge that gap in thinking and make the transition a little bit kind of easier for the company to absorb? Because otherwise it seems like the incubators sit in a silo and it's a fun place to play in the sandbox, but you don't really get plugged in, right? So how do you? By the way,
the performance zone is thinking these people get away with murder. There's no accountability, and often, by the way, they're right. There isn't accountability, so it's not okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, so a couple of thoughts. First of all, this transition zone play, you have to say here are the qualifying factors. We have to be able to go to essentially the same customer prospect base that we know today. In other words, I'm not asking my sales force to develop a whole new relationship with a whole new set of people. If I have to do that, I'm going to have to incubate a route to market too. So the assumption is no, this product, it's new. It's not in our existing product line, but the customer for our existing product line, or at least somebody pretty closely adjacent to that customer, would be interested in this capability. That's number one. Number two is if you can actually be what we at Salesforce, they used to call them a level 2 product. And so a level 2 product is like inside Sales Cloud. Do you want to buy Sales Einstein? Do you want to buy, lead, whatever, these various sub products? If you can become a sub product in an established product line, that's easy for everybody. That's easy for the customer. It's easy for the salesperson. You will still need to have an overlay salesperson to explain the new application and compete against new competitors, because you will be bringing new competitors to the table. There'll be point product competitors, but there'll be competitors. So you need to give the sales force some people that know how to do hand-to-hand combat in that specific category. But mostly what a large corporation is doing is they're increasingly trying to compete as a suite against best of breed. So the biggest difference here is that that first time around, you're the best of breed kid, right? That's your claim to fame. But now you're saying, no, it's the suite. And so how do I get that? And so as a result, I may tell the incubation zone person, that amazing extra feature that takes it into like Never Land? We're not going to go forward with that feature, which is like, wait, but that was the most exciting thing. Yeah, I know, but the world is the way the world is dealing with us. This is how it's got to go. So it's a little bit more of a realistic thing. And the way the issue with the performance zone is they have to be a little bit patient, but they know that they need products for the next year and the following year, and so they have some patience. What they don't want to do is to have you put a product in their zone that they're wasting time with, because these people want to make quota. I mean, basically, they just want to go to club, and so if you're telling me your product can't help me get to club at some point, it's like, well, stay in the incubation zone then, because I'm the performance zone. My job is to get to club.
All right, Amy, thank you for your question. Appreciate it. I think we have time for one last one here. Hopefully, Genia, are you able to hop in here? There we go. Go for it.
Hi. Yes. Thank you so much. Fascinating topic. And I love your frameworks. So I was thinking about your accountability metrics framework, and the fact that sort of in the performance zone, it's about financial results and not necessarily adoption metrics. And I was thinking about the, like large companies with a lot of sort of product lines in the performance zone. But what I've observed is sometimes they just fall into this feature trap, just building out features, feature factory. And that's where I found actually being disciplined about adoption metrics is really important. But then you measure adoption in terms of just like your existing products, but you look at the depth of adoption, sort of like how many of our features are getting adopted, like feature by feature, like what are you measuring, what's just not being touched at all, as well as the breadth of adoption, like how many end users within this customer are actually actively using it. And so I just was wondering if you have a comment around that.
This is great. And particularly with any kind of subscription or SaaS-like model.
Right.
So you remember in the zones, the two below I called enabling. Both of them will use adoption metrics, but for different purposes. In the incubation zone, you're doing adoption to figure out, am I getting traction? Am I getting penetration? Yeah. Is this thing working? In the productivity zone, you're saying, look, you land in the performance zone, but if you attrit, then, what was that about? And by the way, we spent a bunch of money on R&D. If the customer never uses that feature, what was that about? And by the way, those features are actually boring the customer and they're actually causing them to attrit. So I think running productivity zone performances around adoption metrics and adoption signals are ways to report back to the performance zone leaders, the PMs in the performance zone. Hey guys, look, this is like me on LinkedIn. That was a hot blog. That was not. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think this notion of product management, for a long time we said, well, the product manager listens to the customer. No, we didn't. We never. Until the 20th century, we literally listened to ourselves and we built the best products we possibly could. And the hell with the customer. And we worried a lot about the competitor, but not the customer. But now we're saying, man, with this subscription model, so listening to the customer and getting the signal. And so what I love about what you said is that, particularly if you can use telemetry, so that remember, we're back to data-driven decision-making. I want to make a data-driven decision about adoption, but I have to have good signal to do that. All that's got to be built in the productivity zone. I mean, hopefully the product manager's got to be accountable, but you would love to have a corporate engineering function that says, we're doing telemetry or we're doing signal capture. And by the way, then you'd love to have somebody in the customer success or customer,
Right.
hey, we're gonna continually filter this stuff as we go forward. It's a big deal. It's a good idea.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Gina, thank you for your question. Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom in your talk, have a chat with me, and answer the top questions from our audience. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you always. And as I said, I think product managers do the heavy lifting for our industry, and God bless every single one of them. Okay, take care, guys.
All right, Jeff, thanks a lot. Take care.